everybody hear me? All right. What? Huh? Turn up your hearing in there. Wow, full house. We also have a special guest. I got my cousin in Louisiana watching in this morning. She had gallbladder surgery, and she is recovering, and so she got an opportunity to sit and listen. So, okay, you guys aren't scary. I'll just stop being nervous. All right. This morning we'll be continuing back to the basic series that we've been going through, and I will be covering creation by design as opposed to the atheistic Big Bang theory. Also, the purpose of man and why we were created in his image. But first, let's just review a little bit about what's already been established. Sonny spoke of God. He said, God doesn't spend a lot of time trying to convince us of his existence, and that creation itself is a clear testimony of it. And if you claim there is no God, God simply says, fool. God is knowable and attainable. Yet, as Christians, we still live our life as if there is no God. And then he said, God exists as three individual separate beings, the Father, the Son, and Spirit, acting independently, but yet in perfect unison with each other. In other words, it's a perfect relationship. Last week, Mike covered God Speaks. He showed us that the Bible is God's way of communicating with us, and that as creator of all things, he is ultimate authority of all things. He gave us his word that we may know him intimately and understand his desire for us. Therefore, it really is beneficial for us to look at the Bible as our ultimate authority and then apply it in our lives. This morning's topic is a bit controversial, not only between the world's view and God's view, but it's often a controversy amongst Christians. It's a topic that many tend to shy away from because it forces us to make a decision, to either trust God and his account of creation or not. My goal this morning is to either establish or help settle in your mind three very important statements. The reason that they are so important is because what you decide to solidify in your mind about each statement will determine and reflect outwardly in your lives and what you truly believe about God and in what manner you're going to live your life. Are you going to live your life for God, or are you going to live your life for yourself? The first statement is, there's no conflict between Christianity and science itself. This is because the Christian worldview, which believes that God created the world with natural laws and orderliness, is what undergirds all scientific study. Scientific experimentation relies heavily on some predictable constants. There need to be some things that are constant that we can count on, right? In order to, otherwise, the experiments aren't ever going to come out the same. You need constants and variables so you can determine, what the outcome's going to be. Sorry, lost my spot. For example, water still boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit at sea level. Tomorrow it's going to do it tomorrow just as it did today. And gravity will still impact us, and it's going to have an impact on all of us. Some of us a little more than others, but okay. But it's still the same as when it was first created. These are natural laws that have a supernatural God put into place. Statement number 2. There is a total conflict between Christianity and scientific naturalism. I'm sorry. I don't like to wear these, but things are getting just a little blurry. So, all right. Well, that's better. Scientific naturalism is a belief that only natural laws and forces, as opposed to supernatural ones, operate in the world and that nothing exists beyond the natural world. Naturalists assert the natural laws are the rules that govern and structure and behavior of the natural world. Okay. That the universe is a mere product of these laws and that the goal of science is to discover and publish them systematically. And third, the Bible in general, and the book of Genesis in particular, was not written to be a scientific textbook. Genesis is written as a narrative to reveal the God of creation, which means its emphasis on God and his relationship with humanity, and not on creation. I'm sorry. Its emphasis is concerned more with the question of who made creation and why he created it than when. Galileo said, the Holy Spirit, just getting crazy. The Holy Spirit intended to teach us how to go to heaven and not how the heavens go. The Bible opens up with a panoramic view of creation, and quickly the camera focuses in on creation of Adam and Eve and the interaction that God has with them. The very first line of the Bible establishes a controversy between those that believe that God is the creator and thus ultimate authority, as Mike spoke about last week, and those that want to deny the existence of God or any other supreme being, so as to avoid any accountability that may be placed upon them. They don't want to be held accountable. So if you deny God, how can you be accountable? You may have noticed I used the word those that believe rather than the word Christians, because not all proclaimed Christians believe the biblical account of creation. Some people believe in God and salvation, yet they don't believe that Adam and Eve were real people, but were mere fictitious characters designed to represent mankind. And the creation of the universe could not have happened instantaneously and immediately after God spoke them, nor within the time frame of a single day, but rather slowly developed over the span of millions of years, as the theory of evolution suggests. Truth is, a lot of people like to ride the fence here. Keep one foot in each camp, between God's view and the world's view, not really willing to commit to one side or the other. So I wonder if somehow they believe that if they keep themselves just a little bit ignorant, that maybe they can go to God and say, well, God, I wasn't quite sure that all this creation stuff was true. You know, I thought it was more like a object lesson or an example. Well, and then since maybe that's not true, maybe some of the other stuff in the Bible isn't true either. So maybe you should just let me slide on that accountability thing. What do you think? Because, you know, I just wasn't sure. So what's God going to say? Not. I don't think so. You know, at least the atheists are committed. And God says he'd rather us be hot or cold than lukewarm. The Big Bang Theory is an effort to explain what happened at the beginning. Okay, we're going to start with the Big Bang. The Big Bang Theory is an effort to explain what happened at the very beginning of our universe. Discoveries in astronomy and physics have shown beyond a reasonable doubt that our universe did, in fact, have a beginning. Prior to that moment, there was nothing. And during and after that moment, there's something. There's a universe. Basically saying, well, there's nothing here, and then suddenly, hey, look at that. Where did that come from? So now they want to find out where to come from. That's what your study is. The Big Bang Theory is an effort to explain what happened during and after that moment. You know, I once took a course in college. It was on creation. And it was at the University of Wisconsin. And the purpose, the professors told me the purpose of the class was, he stated that two cosmetic gases collided somewhere, somehow, causing a thermonuclear explosion, which created and started in motion an expanding universe where planets were formed and arranged in perfect working order to provide and to sustain life on one planet that's called Earth. You know, I immediately dropped the glass. And you know what? The truth is, not because, you know, I was a Christian. I wasn't even saved at the time, and I was so entrenched in the world that God was not even a thought. I dropped the class because somehow instinctively I knew that it was the biggest line of garbage I ever heard. I said, if they're going to teach this, I'm not going to waste my time or my money. The Big Bang tries to convince that perfect order was created out of extreme chaos. But yet, they contradict themselves because they also believe in the second law of thermodynamics, which clearly contradicts their theory. And if you're not familiar with the second law of thermodynamics, well, don't feel bad. I wasn't either. I had to look it up. But basically, it says the universe consists entirely of matter and energy. The first law of thermodynamics states that matter and energy cannot be created, nor can it be destroyed. The quantity of matter and energy remains the same. It can change from a solid, liquid, to gas, to plasma, and back again. It can change forms. But the total amount of matter and energy in the universe remains constant, and we were given all that we will ever have. But the second law states that while quantity remains the same, the quality deteriorates over time. How so? Its usable energy is inevitably used for productivity, growth, repair. It's being constantly used. And usable energy is once used is converted to unusable energy, known as entropy. This conversion it's irreversible. It can't go back. Once used, it can't go back to a unusable state. As usable energy is lost, disorganization, randomness, and chaos increase. The universe was at its beginning at zero entropy, entirely usable, in its most organized state. And since energy, once used, can never be converted back to a usable state, it's concluded that order cannot come from chaos. This is what they believe. They believe that order cannot come from chaos, but they just proclaim that order, perfect order, was created from chaos. Scientists with a naturalistic view also adhere to these laws, and since we are always losing usable energy and never gaining, conclusion the universe is not eternal, it is like a wind-up clock, that at its beginning it was fully wound up, and throughout time it's been unwinding. But every avenue that they take to prove that nothing supernatural exists outside of our universe, they still fail to answer who wound up the clock. You know, they hit a stumbling block every time. Everywhere they go, they're always running into this. They can get so far, having all these discoveries, but when they get to the end, they can't explain who put it there to begin with. Who put the gases there to begin with? And they say, I don't know. Where was it at? Outside the universe, inside the universe? I don't know. Well, obviously outside the universe because it created the universe. So where was that? And every journal I looked in, it was, I don't know. to the same question, or same type of question. NASA astronomer Robert Jastrow commented in the book God and the Astronomers, theologians generally are delighted with the proof that the universe had a beginning. But astronomers are curiously upset. For the scientist who has lived by faith in his power of reasoning, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak. And as he pulls over the final rock, is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. It seems the cosmic egg that was the birth of our universe logically requires a cosmic chicken. In a nutshell, I'm going to try and demonstrate to you what the Big Bang wants you to believe. And Taylor, don't worry, get your toys back. Okay, so, dynamite. Well, not just dynamite, nuclear dynamite. In this bowl, I have plastic, wires with connectors, and a power source. I have a memory chip, the glass, clear glass, plastic. And when it turns dark, this, and just some more plastic. Now, I'm going to put this all in a bowl. Now, according to their theory, I was going to bring some real dynamite, but Tim said no. Didn't think it'd be a good idea. So, if I light this and put all this in here, and mind you, there's far more ingredients or parts to make up something, than just two gases. There's far more than two. And explosion. You're going to have to imagine explosion, but they're saying if I put all those in there and it explodes, what you're going to come out with is a perfectly operating cell phone. You believe that? That takes far more faith to believe something like that than it does to believe in a creator, supernatural being, God, who made it with perfect design and perfect precision. Because chaos can only and will always create more chaos. Believers of this theory try to use science and reason as a means to prove the non-existence of God. But what they fail to realize, or should I say refuse to realize, is that all science and natural law were created by God. So that at every point they're going to come to the same conclusion. Because it was created by God, it can only point to God. That's all it can do. If you remember their purpose statement for the Big Bang Theory, that something was, one moment it wasn't there, the next minute it's not there. Science actually is a testimony to exactly what God said. Science testifies God's existence. There are two Hebrew words that are used in Genesis that describe the manner in which God creates. The one being bara, which means created from nothing. And this manner is exclusive to God and God alone. The universe was spoken into existence. He created it from nothing. And the second one, yes, okay. I'm new to this, so get it. Is asa, to fashion or shape. or make from something. Now, God can use both, but this is the one that man does. We can't create something from nothing. We have to take something that's already been created. We can shape it, form it, and manipulate it, and make it into something useful. So let's look at God's account. In Genesis, if you have a Bible app, you can, or we'll go to Genesis 1:1. And we'll start with the beginning, and God says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. God says, I created them, period. Makes a very short, quick statement. I made it. End of story. Once again, he doesn't try very hard to convince us. If we doubt in any way the first words, the first sentence that God says to us, then really, you might as well not read the rest of it, because it's just a fairy tale. And what do you know is true or not? You might as well just throw it away. And that's what a lot of naturalists and people will believe. You'll try to disclaim God. Well, say, see, it's a fairy tale. That didn't really happen. So they're trying to discredit it right from the very good. Most of us are already pretty familiar with the chain of events, the order in which God created them. So what I want to focus on is, as in any design project, there are progressive, orderly states and steps, process required to make it successful and workable. God tells us in verse 2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. God started with water. Formless, no definite form, and a liquid. But yet it's also the most essential element, to any living thing, isn't it not? Without water, everything living would die. Our bodies are approximately 75% water. So, can anybody guess, just ironically, what percent of the earth is covered in water? 71 in liquid water, 4 to 6% more in ice and vapor. Day one, God established a source of heat and light by creating the sun and its polar opposite, the moon. Genesis 1:3 says, God said, let there be light. And there was light. The sun is approximately 93 million miles from the earth. It was placed exactly where it needed to be to sustain life. Any farther away, if it drifted any farther away, we'd freeze. If it was any closer or moved in any closer, we'd burn. You can't get that out of chaos. Perfect placement. The gravitational pull of the sun and moon has the greatest effect upon the earth and the sustaining of life. The regular rise and fall of sea level creates a unique environment in the solar system. Do you realize tides? It exposes us to both water, it immerses us in water, and exposes us to air in the space of just a few hours. The constant rising and lowering of the table creates like what do you do in the mixer bowl when you're kind of lifting it? You know what I mean? You're not just stirring, but you're kind of folding. Okay, like a folding effect. Thank you. And what it does, it exposes, water into the air and just creates motion, so things don't get stagnant. Can you see? It all works together. Day 2, God created the heavens. Genesis 1. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. God spoke it, and it was so. Verse 2, and God called the firmament heaven, and on the evening and the morning were the second day. God created the atmosphere. And it's an atmosphere that protects us from the sun's radiation, while at the same time warming the surface through heat retention, the greenhouse effect, while also reducing temperatures extremes between day and night. Atmospheric pressure keeps the oxygen plants emit and that we require, and the carbon dioxide that we emit and plants require, contained on the earth and within the atmosphere. It's an endless cycle. He's building something that will regenerate itself continuously because it's going to last a long time. We will always have oxygen because we give off carbon dioxide. Once you start the ball rolling, it just continues to roll. God established boundaries between dry land and the seas. Genesis 9:1-9. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together unto one place. Let the dry land appear, and it was so. 10. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. I searched the question, why don't the oceans overrun the earth? And this is the answer I got. It says, first off, they do on occasion. Continental flooding has been seen in prehistory. It's been seen throughout history. But it doesn't stay that way. But the real reason why the coastlines remain mostly stable is the input-output of the oceans. Just about equal themselves. Think about it. Most water entering the ocean is from rain. And rain comes from the ocean, and the ocean gains water from volcanism and it loses it from subduration. Basically, in a nutshell, what happens is clouds go over, absorb the water from the oceans, carry it over dry land, disperse it, which then seeps back into the ground, and then flows back to the ocean, to the waters. Another endless but operating cycle. And God said, verse 11, let the earth bring forth grass and herb yielding seeds, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after its kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after its kind. And God said, it was good. I approve. And the evening and the morning were the third day. Okay. Now we have regenerating green plants and trees to provide oxygen and nutrition. And it's forever, after its own kind. That's important to note. Meaning there will always be some variances, but within the species. But a tree is always going to be a tree. It was from the very start. It was today, and it's always going to be a tree. Evolution wants to say, well, there was an organism. It started out here, and then through time and progression, it took the best of, through natural selection, took the best of everything, and then turned into an entirely different thing, different species. They use an ape that progressed over time to a man. They use that to explain our existence. But I'm sorry, my ancestors were never a monkey. So, We can look outside, yet today, and the evidence of nature itself, how it's still obedient to the natural, to what God set up from the very beginning. Look outside, grass is still doing what it's always done. There's different types of trees, but there's still a tree. I haven't seen a cat turn into a fish. And if that's so, why did they stop? Where's the next? They should still be progressing, right? We should start seeing maybe another arm come off because it would be useful to have 3 arms sometimes, right? But it doesn't. It doesn't make any sense. In essence, they're just trying to disprove the existence of God because as man, they don't want to be held accountable. They want to, Satan sold them a lie that we can be our own gods. We don't need God. And do you see a working pattern here? God is creating an environment that will sustain life. And he's doing it in a designed, progressive way that it needs to be. It's done in proper, perfect order. And then he establishes natural laws and cycles of all working together to keep itself held in a constant, balanced state. And he did it in 3 days, literal days. As Mike emphasized last week, and Sonny, he wants us to keep this to about 35, 40 minutes. So, I was talking with Sonny the other day. I said, well, I have a little difficult time with organization and running things through. And some people have experienced it, and Jody can tell you that. He says, well, here's something you might be familiar with. He says, imagine a highway. You got point A, point B. And you get on the interstate, and it's a planned route, and you're driving. But along the way, you can take a little detour, a little rest stop. So to speak, grab something to eat, get some fuel, but then get right back on the highway. And I said, oh, yeah, I can do that. Short pauses. Well, I can do that. Because mine would be more like the superhighway or the Autobahn. But he says, because I can kind of rattle on once I get going forever. And as I was walking away, that song popped into my head. It says, life is a highway. I'm going to drive it all night long. And I was kind of laughing to myself. I told Jody, and she said, well, it'd probably be more like the highway to, if you know the song. So, anyways. So I guess for everyone's sake, and to stay within the allotted time, I want to move on to the last statement. I think it is highly evident that our world and even our bodies must stay in a constant state of balance. Those of you who work out, you understand how the body works. Jody, I know, does. Tim. It's you need that it's always fighting to stay balanced. And that's what the earth is doing, the same thing. It's trying to stay in that balance, to work efficiently and stay working. Chaos is chaos because there's nothing constant nor dependable about it. So all evidence points to God. God tells us in his word that just as a piece of music tells us something about the composer, and just as a piece of art tells us something about the artist, creation itself gives insight to the character and the glory of our Creator. Verse 26 answers. Remember the statement in 3. I'm sorry. Rewind. But the next and more important question to answer is why. So really what I want to talk to is, why did God create it? What was God's purpose for all of this and for us? And then verse 26 tells us that answer. The countless times I've read this, I've read it, and somehow I've always walked away with the idea that God created the earth, and man was kind of an afterthought because he needed someone to take care of it. I don't know why. Someone was just always kind of there. But you know what? Then Sonny said something, the other day. It just really kind of turned on the light. He said that we use a tripod because it's the strongest and most dependable base we could use. Each side acting equally independent from the other, yet totally dependent on each other. 3 individual legs. And no matter where you put it, level is best, but they will act independently in their purpose, but still dependent on all of them. You take one away, you don't have the strength or the stability. The pyramids were created in the same manner and with the same foundation, and they're standing yet today. A 3-point stance. And so now, really, what happened is, I'm thinking about this, and it really kind of cleared up and made a Trinity make more sense. God is a Trinity, and it's perfect, and it's a unified relationship. It's strong. There's strength. They're all unified. They all are individual, 3 individual people, 3 individual beings having 3 different purposes, acting independent in their purpose and in their role, but yet totally dependent on each other. Stop and think about it. You see that everywhere in nature, right? Our bodies, made up what? An individual cell, each cell having an independent purpose, but totally dependent on the others. They connect, and it works. You take one element, one of them away, it doesn't work. Because I'm trying to explain now the image of God. We were made in the image of God. And it dawned on me, I don't know why it took so long, but God didn't create a functioning world with man as an afterthought. What God was doing was creating a home, the perfect home for his desired creation, and made in his own image, man. We were created as triune beings in the likeness of God. And I'm not saying that we are God, because like I said, Satan sold us that lie way back, in the Garden of Eden. And because of a built-in flaw called the propensity of sin, which Ryan will be explaining a little, giving me more on that next week, we believed it. Somehow thinking, hey, I can be an individual, I can be independent, and I don't have to be dependent. You separate it, it doesn't work. The relationship is severed. God's loving character is demonstrated in the care he took in creating the perfect universe. You especially see it in the way he created man. Well, we're going to move into chapter 2, verse 7. And the Lord formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And man became a living soul. Everything that God created up to this point, when he created the universe and the earth and the animals and the birds and the trees and the grass, everything that was created, God barad, or created from nothing. Yet it's kind of an impersonal way of bringing it into existence. He spoke it. With man, he used ara, which means to form and fashion. God took the time, and because of his love and his desire for his creation, he took the time to put his hands and personally take from the earth. We are the only being that is created from something that was already created. When we die, we will return to the earth. But we were fashioned and formed with loving hands. And then, what did he do? He breathed his living spirit, a part of himself, into us. I mean, you can imagine, basically, he went down on his mouth and breathed. Almost like, this is my child, this is my creation. And gave life with an intimate act, like a kiss. We were created with a mind, body, and spirit. Living spirit. That's first man. That's how he was created. 3 individual parts, acting independent in function, yet totally dependent on each part. When you do this, you have 3 individual parts, mind, bodies, soul, spirit. And they act independently, but yet totally dependent on each other. You have 1 equals 1 perfectly functioning man, unified in mind through the spirit of a living God. God created us because, like Sonny said, he had this perfect relationship. He wasn't lonely. But he just had so much and so much love. He wanted to share it. So, what better way to do that? God calls himself Father. Just like Taylor. Where is she? She's hiding. Maybe she's not here. But Taylor is an extension of Jody and I, of us. Our children are an extension. We have a relationship with them. I mean, if you look at the 3-point method, it works everywhere. You see the same structure in our families. Don't you not? Father, mother, child, all working. When we're all working together, it's fantastic. Because of sin, it's chaos. It was never designed to be that way. But yet God, like a father who, sometimes we have to save our children even from themselves. I've experienced that many times. But why do we do it? We do it because we love them. If you question ever that God loved you and desired the relationship with you, and if you're ever had to do that as a parent, you understand. Sometimes it's hard, but you got to see your kids, you see them going in the wrong direction or see them doing something that you've experienced is going to hurt them. You want to jump in and save them, right? Or help them out. Different, and it's not the same for everyone what you actually have to do. But what the desire there is in your heart. That's because they're your children and you still love them. And you still want that, you desire a relationship, you ache for them. God saw what happened, and Ryan, I don't want to step on his toes, but because I want to leave us with where the end of creation, where God I don't want to preface. Okay. I'm going to jump to, because like I said, I don't want to step on his toes there. You see the next step that God did in verse 8. That was good. It's chaos. There's your bang. There we go. Oh, look what I found. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Lord. I needed that. Lord God, what did you do next? You know the word, he says, he planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. Another, not an impersonal way of making the garden, was it? He said, he even planted it. He went out there and planted it. Because we were going to be special. And we were designed to have a personal, intimate relationship with a supernatural living being, God, that works perfect unity. And that's what he desired for us. That's what he created this for. And that's what's missing in our lives. In the garden, Satan, the lie was, God said, you would certainly die. But what does Satan do? He kind of leaves out information, doesn't he? Oh, the lie is not really a lie because, well, you won't really die. He's not talking your body would suddenly fall down and be dead, right? What happened? God's spirit was cut because he could not associate with sin. A living spirit, the third part of what makes us a living soul, a living being. And that relationship was severed. But God, in his great glory, devised a plan to bring us back. I'll save you. Not now. Sorry, hang on. This is not a perfectly working cell phone. Okay. I better put it on mute because they'll start buzzing. All right, there we go. I got a treat for you. I want to show you the image of God instead of trying to explain it. There is the image of God in each and every one of us here. Look around. Look at each other. We're all the image of God. But there is one person who claimed God's promise, salvation, and that we could have a relationship with him. And Sonny had mentioned about a month ago that he had a video. I'm going to show that video. I have a cousin, her name is Catherine, and her sister is watching. Hi, Karen. This morning. I called my aunt. I haven't seen Karen very often since we were very young. We kind of lost touch because of distance. They live in Louisiana, and I live here. What I do remember about Karen is her absolute faith in Christ. Let me just give you a little bit background on her. At the age of 2, Karen, they found a malignant brain tumor. And they were able to remove it. But they said she's only going to have 16 months to live. She's not going to live very long. They don't know God, because God gave her 42 more years on this earth. In 1991, they found 4 more brain tumors, plus thyroid cancer, and a lung tumor. She had a very difficult life. The brain tumor, it caused some retardation, not extreme, but people shunned her. I called my aunt last night because I wanted information of her life and her. And she had, throughout those years, she had endless radiation treatments, multiple tumors, some removed, some that couldn't be. Her life was a struggle, basically to say. And she says, I asked her, when did Catherine get saved? Because I saw her last when I was about 18 or 19 years old. And she would have been about 8 or 10. And I remember her motor skills were not very good. No, take that back. We did see her together once, didn't we? Okay. But I guess what I'm saying, at age 10, you could see in her, she talked about God. That's what she talked about. I mean, she would literally get up. It was hot down in Louisiana, muggy, and I mean, it was very difficult for her just to move. Her motor skills were not very well. But she would get up and go get something to serve you. You didn't have to ask. She'd just come and offer. And then after you went in, she'd say, you want more? I said, no, Catherine, sorry. No, you don't have to do that. Because you could see the difficulty that she had in what we take for granted. And her whole life was that way. Bonnie said, my Aunt Bonnie, hi Bonnie, said that you could just see, I don't know exactly when she was saved. I says, in many ways, she was still a child. And she would always be a child. He says, but what you saw the maturity in was her relationship with Christ. She got it. She fully understood. You said you watched it mature and grow the more and more in her life. She had nothing in this world. The world offered her nothing. She would never marry. She would never have children. She said there were times that she had noticed that younger children could sing and do things that she could never do. And it says, and Bonnie said, I sat down and explained to her that, yes, this is true. He says, but God has something special for you. And even though people shunned her, and he says she would get really odd looks, she did finish high school, and for a short period of time, off and on, she worked as a candy striper in a hospital. She would push people from short distances from one. It gave her something to do. And guess what she did with her time? She talked to people. She said, everyone she met. Do you know Jesus? She had a job. She had a purpose. Spread the word. The ultimate purpose. And she took it seriously. And she is living there. She lived on earth the joy, because she said, people would shun her, they'd make fun. I says, but she never felt their sting. Never. And this really hit me. she once told her, says, the lady said, never waste a pain. This is a quote. Never waste a pain that can be offered up to Christ. Never waste a pain. And her entire life was pain, either physically or mentally. She said she felt honored to suffer for Christ because he suffered for us. This is what she believed. This is what her life proved. This is what she lived out. It wasn't just talk. In the last year of her life, she lost the ability to speak. But prior to that, she knew she was going to die. She understood that, and she wasn't scared because she knew where she was going to go. So she made some videos because she wanted people to know. She wanted to talk to the people. She actually got to speak at her own funeral. And I'm going to show you one of these videos.
So instead of feeling sorry and saying, look at me, I got a
this
sick
is the second
body,
half.
I was sick with this, I was sick with that. You look at those situations and thank God you're alive and thank the Lord for making your spirit strong and stronger in Him. I today don't know if I'm gonna live or if God's gonna call me home. But I don't go through each day being sad. I hold on to Jesus every single day.
Catherine died in July while I was on vacation. I saw this video. And when Pastor said, offered up the creation in the image of God, when I looked in her face and I saw the image of God. I didn't see a crippled person. I didn't see a person, in most of this world, the world would say, hey, you have every right to complain. I saw a perfectly working person with a living spirit. That we can have the same thing. I was envious. I mean, just the comments that I've read just amplified to her life with Christ. It put me to shame. I says, I'm entrenched, even though I'm Christian, I still entrench myself on the world and the busyness and everything else. She didn't have to worry about all this. She just worried about God. And her job was to present the message. That is our job too. And you know what? I talked to Karen and she told me that you could feel that her spirit leave when she left. It says it was almost, you could feel her spirit moving out of the room. But we weren't sad. It says it was spirit. It says, because we know where she went. We have no doubt. We can have a perfect relationship with Christ here on earth. Scott said, where's Scott? Yeah. Walks out this time. God commands us be holy as we are, as he is holy. It's possible. It's very difficult, but it's possible. And we make excuse because, I'm not saying she was the perfect person, but I know she enjoyed that relationship inwardly, and it expressed outwardly what God designed us to be. And you know what? God is blessing her yet, because yesterday, there are several other videos. They were shown at a National Ladies Conference. She, even though she's not here, she is still witnessing. And God is blessing. I mean, it's amazing if you really stop and think about it. She had nothing in this world that would be considered successful. But I honestly believe the bells were ringing when she was at the gate, and it's open wide, and she heard, "Thou good and faithful servant, blessed be to you." And she's still working today, because this is amazing. Where these videos are going out, and how many people, she's still touching the hearts of people. I can't say that about myself. Verse 8 tells us, that God planted the Garden of Eden, and it was our place to dwell upon this earth. It's just like a loving father, to conclude things, like a loving father would do for his children. God gave his child property, the earth, and then built him a home on that property, the Garden of Eden, and said, "It's all yours to take care of." Dominion, which means to take a hold of, control. It's yours. And guess what? I have given you my loving Spirit, my living Holy Spirit, to guide you. You won't be alone. I'll come down and visit you. He gave something to his child, his creation. But since sin entered into the world, this perfect, harmonious relationship, and it came between God and man, it was his. And we had one restriction. God said, you have one restriction. He says, don't eat of this tree. One. Everything else was his to enjoy. And because there was no sin and a perfect union with God, with mind, with God, there was harmony. But unfortunately, something did happen, which Ryan will cover next week, that caused us, unfortunately, to be removed from the garden. And now all we have is hear the echoes of Eden. I don't know your hearts. I don't know. And I hope I've established that the world and scientists and all that they do try to discredit God and say, oh, he's not real. There's only natural law, and that's all there is. There's nothing that exists beyond this. And that science in itself will point everywhere. Every time they come, it will point every time, because it can do nothing else, back to God and what he said. And we have to either believe it or you don't. You can't have 2 feet. You can't be right on the fence, 1 foot on either side, just in case. It's not going to fly. Because you know what? It's going to show up. It's going to work itself outwardly into your lives. And people are going to know. And when people talk to Catherine, they saw her life expressed in every aspect of it. They didn't have to question. It brought credibility to what she was saying. If you don't have that relationship, God, I don't know your hearts, but if you need to accept Christ today, do it now. Do it right away, because we're not guaranteed another moment, let alone another day. Anything could happen this moment we move out of here, we leave here. Take that time. If God's calling you, if he's tugging at your heart, or if he's to get saved, then don't wait. If he's tugging at your heart about something in your life that you need to change, to deepen that relationship, to grow and mature, you know what? Why fight it? Because all we're doing is miss out on joy. Believe me, being your own God isn't the greatest thing. Having to think independently from myself and get it wrong 90% of the time is horrible. Let's close. Thank you. Lord,